Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am host one of two, along with Brice, who is two of two. And it is another week of football, the football chronicles of this, of the United States. We don't know just how it's going to come back, but we do know it's trying its hardest, and a lot of things are going on. But first and foremost, Brice, how are you doing, man? How's life?
Man, I'm doing well, man. Just doing what I do every day, man. Just trying to survive out here, just like everybody else is.
I feel that 100%. It's a weird time to be a football fan right now, because there's just every other day you're just not sure if this is the right move that a lot of the league and different entities of football are doing. But one of the better moves that has occurred in recent time is Reggie Bush has been redeemed. The redemption. It's been a long time coming. As if you know me, you know my favorite position in football are running backs. And although running backs at this moment in time, their value has depreciated. They have many tendencies to hold out for money because they have no choice, or else they might run into situations where, injuries and not guaranteed money that can hurt people. So a lot of running backs hold out. But all that being said, I love the position. It's my favorite position. And as being a Saints fan, one of the most iconic Saints players to ever grace the football field was Reggie Bush. Because coming out of college, Reggie Bush probably was the most electrifying player we've seen in like the 2000s, at least one of them. And his college highlight tape is one for the books. It might be one of the best, if not the best, college highlight tapes I've ever seen. And if you don't know, if you maybe young or you weren't around when this happened, he definitely got punished by the NCAA for receiving money, gifts, forms of, he took a lot of impermissible benefits during his time as a Trojan, and that cost USC postseason bans and other issues for USC. And then, of course, they took away his Heisman. But for 10 years, he has been essentially cast aside from USC's legacy. They've basically told him that he cannot be a part of anything that has to involve USC. And that was it for the last 10 years until recently, where he has been essentially brought back as, it's not like the NCAA changed their mind, right? It was the 10-year ban. Like it's the 10 years that is the requirement. And then they have the chance to either re-up or not, I believe. And they definitely decided to say, you don't need to re-up. For one, the punishment did not fit the crime, and in my opinion. And two, it just was, you took away a legacy from a man who honestly, it's not like he did steroids. It's not like he cheated. He didn't bet on games. This is a guy who took money because, his family was, not as well off as they are now. And, he was just trying to make his family be all right at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people would look at this situation with 2020's viewpoint, and I think it would go a lot differently. But I guess today is a mild celebration that Reggie Bush is in the good graces back in college football, and not just college football, but also USC. Brice, what are your thoughts on Reggie Bush being redeemed back into the college football graces?
I think it's great, man. I think it's overdue. I think he should have been there in the first place. I believe that Reggie Bush is one of the reasons why USC became USC during the era when USC was great. He was the reason why kids wanted to go to USC after him, because they knew Reggie Bush played here, probably one of the greatest college running backs to ever play the game, especially at USC. And it's just one of those things that I think, I'm glad he's back there. I'm sure they're going to embrace him, and I'm sure, you never know. Reggie Bush now can have an input and a impact on the community of Southern California once again, and can maybe help out, because obviously USC is not in the greatest shape currently as a football program right now, as they're stuck in mediocrity. But maybe bringing Reggie Bush back could help with recruiting, could help with the morale of the campus, could help with everything, and really, put them and project them into the right direction that they need so they can be successful into the future, while also appreciating and finally, just accepting Reggie Bush back into their group and everything, and I think that's something that is really big, especially with everything going on right now. This is big. I know Reggie is extremely happy because, he picked that school. He had a great time at that school. He won a national championship for that school. And, who wouldn't want to be in Los Angeles with USC Trojans? So, I'm glad that they brought him back and they reinstated him back into their union, their university.
Yeah, it's insane to think about the NCAA and the sanctions they put on USC and, frankly, Reggie Bush, because the job still isn't done. They need to give him his Heisman back, because this is what really contributed. Why should somebody have to give up their Heisman trophy for taking money? Not for taking performance enhancing drugs, not for something that is drastically seen as a societal bad, right? This is not a situation where there was any violence done. There was no cheating scandal. There was no gambling. There was no betting on games. There was no selling or things like that. This was about him being given, gifts, benefits, things that, many other college players have received and have mentioned they've received after the fact, right? And he got hit with a penalty that I don't think anybody else has received ever since. Like this is really, it was an unprecedented level of punishment given. Unfair. Like, remember when Todd Gurley was selling jerseys or was selling his autographs on jerseys, and the NCAA, didn't they suspend him a game or something like that? I don't really remember exactly.
I think so.
I know he had it was definitely a conversational piece a few years before he ended up going into the NFL. But I mean, sure, he's not selling his autograph or anything like that, but I'm sure things like that still happen to this day. I mean, Johnny Manziel did it in his heyday. He still does it now, per se. I would assume that he still does it now. And more power to them. I mean, sure, rules are rules, and if you're a rule purist, he should not be taking gifts, money, benefits, because that's not a part of NCAA policy. But they act like this man shot somebody. They act like this man disgraced the NCAA. This is going on all the time. All the time. And in fact, I just remembered, of course, James Wiseman was the most recent victim of this NCAA having very, very harsh penalties, to the point to where he doesn't even want to play in the NCAA anymore. He decided, no, I'm not doing that. This is it. I'm done. For taking a monetary, a gift from somebody else. Granted, it's against the rules, but why is it like we have to punish the player to the point to where it seems like they've created this humongous crime? I don't understand it.
Yeah, NCAA has always not been good when it comes to handling situations like this. They seem to always fail when you need them to act, and they seem to always overreact when you don't need them to act. So
It's a gigantic mess sometimes, but I'm glad Reggie Bush is in the good graces of USC. He can be once again reunited with the glory days and, help younger players and be on the sidelines of games, be in practices, be among that team in that area, in that community once again, and not have to be shamed or essentially be taken away from them anymore, because I don't think USC wanted Reggie Bush to be gone. But we're going to take our first break here, and coming back, we're going to be talking about Miami, the Dolphins. What can we expect from Tua? That's coming up. This is the GSM.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast coming right back at you once again. And we are getting into some rookie quarterback discussions. One of the, probably my top 3 favorite things to talk about when it comes to NFL prospects, NFL potential, and just what could happen in a season. And we're talking about Tua Tagoviloa today, Brice. As you know, he's been a little bit of an injury bug guy in recent time in his college career. But this one was more of a real freaky accident and not really something that naturally happened on the football field, I would say. And he has been rehabbing and he's been having success. So his path back from significant hip injuries into playing field has yet to be completed, but has been a case for months now, and he's ahead of the expectations. So he's doing very well, and at least one medical professional working closely with him considers his recovery to be superhuman. He's been doing miraculously well, said Kevin Wilk, a physical therapist who's been working with him in Birmingham, according to the Sun Citadel, or Sentinel. And the miraculous part is that he healed so well. The second part is he's doing well to getting his strength back, and usually that takes a long time after something like this. So coming out of college, we knew a lot of things about Tua Tagoviloa. One, he's a hyper competitor. Like, a lot of people talk about his competitive nature. He always wants to be the best version of himself and always pushes himself and tries to get the best out of other people. And that makes other people better. That's why a lot of people say things like that. I believe it was Mike Tirico. It was somebody big I remember I was listening to, and he was talking about how he was working with Tua Tagoviloa, and he heard stories about the draft, or not the draft, but the recruiting class that he was coming with, and he went to this camp, and he's a guy from Hawaii. He's kind of an outsider with all these guys in the other U.S. states who are more attuned to the actual U.S. than Hawaii, but he's kind of an unknown character at the beginning of camp, and by the end of it, everybody's like, who is this kid? And he's essentially taken over as far as the hype train and stuff like that. He got a few people to basically change their commits to go to Alabama because of just how they gelled with him and liked what he was able to bring to the table. And he has this infectious way of bringing people together. So with all that said, I think a healthy Tua is going to be a quality player in the NFL. And I think a lot of people would agree, but we won't know until it happens. But let's just say Tua is healthy and he gets to he gets the nod to start. What do you expect from Miami's offense? What do we expect from Brian Flores? And what do you think is let's go with the floor and the ceiling. What do you think is Miami's floor this season?
Well, from a floor perspective, I think, okay, they won 5 games last year, so I think the floor would be probably 5-6 games again this year. But obviously being more competitive, that would probably be the floor this year for them. Ceiling wise, I would think a playoff team, not like a number 1 seed or anything like that, but like a wild card team, I would think. I mean, obviously the AFC East is a little bit more wide open, so never know how Buffalo and New York does. They might be able to slide in there, but for the most part, I think it would be a playoff team. And that's where I seat them at. Obviously, it's going to depend on the quarterback play. So obviously, if Tua is the guy going into day one, we'll know. You know, obviously, if Miami makes the playoffs and Tua started day one, I mean, for the most part, that would basically tell you, okay, Tua did a good job if he stayed healthy through all the games, and et cetera. So, you know, Miami is they've made a lot of additions this offseason. They've made a lot of roster turnover. There's a lot of new players. There's a lot of meshing that has to happen. This team is probably one of the teams I like to look at and think, you don't really know. Like, it feels like it's easy for people. I see a lot of people say when they predict Miami season, there's like a 500 team, 8-8. Because I feel like that's the easiest thing to do because you don't know if necessarily they're going to be a winning team, but you don't think they're going to be a losing team either. Because you think, well, they're better than last year and they won 5 games and now they have all this new talent, but you don't want to go out of the way and say, oh yeah, a playoff team, because you don't know how all this talent is going to come together. They still may have some roles on the roster. You still don't know how Tua is going to do. So there's just this, they're kind of in that middle, like I don't know where they're going to end up. So their floor and ceiling can be very different in that regard and everything like that. And, you know, like I said, I think this all depends again if Tua starts. I know some people wonder if Tua will succeed in Miami because some people think he succeeded at Alabama because well, he had 4 receivers who are probably going to go in the first round, 2 this year, probably 2 next year. You know, you have top running backs, top tight ends, one of the best offensive lines, but people forget you had quarterbacks before him at Alabama who weren't as talented as Tua, putting up decent numbers. And now you got a guy who actually was a 5-star coming in. Now he's putting up great numbers and putting Alabama in positions like they always are anyway when they're at championship, but always are playing well. So I think in Miami, I look at their weapons. I think they still have a very talented offensive skill pieces. And I think if Tua, like I said, if they can protect him up front, I feel like there's a lot of potential for them to be very successful moving forward.
Right. And just for clarification, it was not Mike Tirico, but it was Trent Dilfer, who was the man who's been working with Tua Tagoviloa recently. And I just think that Miami has a lot of things that they could do, but realistically, I think that out of all the quarterbacks who have potential to have a really good year, I think Tua might be the one who has the hardest chance. And let me say why that is. It's not like, you know, Justin Herbert is kind of coming into a scenario that only a quarterback could dream. He has the highest potential ceiling, in my opinion, to have a good year, his first year, where there are a lot of quality players around him already. As you know, Hunter Henry is a really, really good tight end who just got franchise tagged, but he's his franchise tag makes him the highest paid tight end in the league currently, as far as on a per year basis. And then, you know, they also have a really, really good bevy of receivers. Like, they have so many receivers on their team. They all can do a whole lot. And, of course, they just got the best value running back. They just signed him as far as they re-signed. Yeah, Austin Eckler is a guy that really can help a young quarterback really do a lot because he is capable of, you know, catching out the backfield, making people miss, do a whole bunch of things. And their offensive line, although Phillip Rivers had some problems last year, but I don't think a lot of it had to do with the offensive line, more of Phillip Rivers' decision making was at a weird state last year. So that team has a lot of potential to be really, really good. And I'm not saying that we should expect Herbert to take them to the playoffs or anything. I just think that he has high potential to be great if he develops in that sort of direction. Tua Tagoviloa, on the other hand, although the roster isn't as bad as we see, we already know their defense has really improved, which is great. They got Kyle Van Noy. They did get the cornerback out of Dallas in free agency. But as far as the offense really hasn't changed too much. They did sign Devontae Parker to to an extension during the regular season. And we know Preston Williams during the regular season before his injury was looking pretty good. And we know Albert Wilson can somewhat do some things. But it is kind of less to be desired kind of front as far as their offensive capabilities. We know they went, after they picked up Tua, they went and got offensive linemen to help, bring a little bit of, I guess, security, so to speak. And that definitely helps with, I guess, if you're a Miami fan, but I wouldn't suspect that he is going to light it up. And I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah, you might. I mean, hey, obviously that's possible. You really never know. Sometimes even with these, you just got to see it sometimes. Because I'm sure there's people who thought certain players would do worse at their start and they do better, and there's teams that thought players would do great and then they did bad. So we really don't know. We can only go off what we've seen and how we think it'll translate. And we'll just have to see how really it all comes together when opening day comes for the season and they go ahead and play.
Right. But we're going to go ahead and get into another break, and we'll come back and talk about OTAs or lack thereof. This is the GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so next on the GSMC podcast that is revolved around football, it's the GSMC Football Podcast. Brice is still here with me, and we're going to be talking about the lack of OTAs this year. As you know, coronavirus has essentially locked down a lot of things that we never thought we would ever not see. So one of those OTAs, we're not going to be having them league-wide across the board, but a lot of players are coming around to having their own versions of OTAs. For example, Josh Allen organizes, his own Bills workouts amid the pandemic. So, some of the league's elders were around back near since the 2010s, and when the lockout forced players to find new avenues for offseason training, Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan was among one of them, and he's relied on that experience to help guide him through, this unusual season. And you see him being able to have workouts with teammates, and you saw Todd Gurley was able to make it out there for the first time after passing his physical and things like that. And Josh Allen, the Bills' starting quarterback, however, wasn't old enough yet to drive back in 2011, and it's only his second off season as a full-time pro, and is definitely not like the others. So Allen's approach has been much about building relationships as it is about on-field work, and he began his quarantine in California's Orange County, where he'd been training with Sam Darnold and Kyle Allen, and where he was able to get some work with Bills rookie Zach Moss and Isaiah Hodges. So, of course, the real get-together occurred in Miami, where Allen was nearly 20 skill players from the Bills, including Stephon Diggs. So we saw Stephon Diggs and him catching balls recently via social media. And they were gathered for about 4 days of quality time and extended weekend together, including training at Pete Bomartio's renowned facility and dinner at the Versace Mansion along Ocean Drive, and hours of late-night card games at the hotel, more workouts, and golf at a country club. So, there was work, play, but it's something that's interesting to me because to be such a young guy, to be able to organize all this together, bring his teammates out there, his new teammates he hasn't really gotten close with, but was able to do all these things amidst, the pandemic, a lot of things going on in social justice reform, but he was still able to get his team to focus on the task at hand and what matters for the season, because if the season is going to continue, which it is, they still have to worry about trying to get to the playoffs and trying to make a deep run at this thing. And they have a defense strong enough, of course, to really take them all the way, in my opinion. And it's up for the offense to kind of pull their weight now. I think at this point, the Bills front office, I think a lot of Bills fans are looking at Josh Allen like this is the year to showcase who you are going to be for us for now. Because like we see with Mitchell Trubisky, and not to bring this as a Mitchell Trubisky hate message here, but we've kind of seen enough of the Mitchell Trubisky experiment, right? I think a lot of people have. That's why, Nick Foles is there. And I'm not saying that when the Bills brought in the rookie quarterback during the draft to light a fire underneath Josh Allen, I don't mean that to say that they're going to immediately move off of Josh Allen if this doesn't go well. But they definitely needed, a backup and somebody preferably young that they can kind of mold into what they would like to see out of someone who could potentially start for them. So Josh Allen may see a little bit of a writing on the wall. It may make him feel a certain type of way that is pushing him to do more things like this early on in his career. And I, for one, am excited to see what the Bills are capable of doing. As you know, the Bills are my AFC team to root for when it's all said and done. So, although my allegiance lays in the NFC South, I should just remind people, my allegiance lies with the black and gold. But when the black and gold are not playing, it's Bills Mafia over here. I just want that to be clear, though. But Brice, what do you feel about Josh Allen organizing all of this? How do you feel about the Bills' chances of, making another run at this playoff thing?
I think they have a great chance. I think they have one of the best rosters in the league, I think. And I also think they have one of the best coaching staffs. I think one thing that they've done so well, and John McDermott's done so well for them, is they're one of the best adjustment second half teams also in the league. And, we're talking about Josh Allen as the writing on the wall. For me, it's not necessarily, first, because, Jake Fromm kind of messed himself up. But second, because I feel like it depends on, obviously, how the season goes. If the Bills win the AFC East, make the playoffs, again, the expectation, Josh Allen had a good year. So there will be nothing debatable coming out of Buffalo. Now, if it's like they go 6-10, 5-11, Josh Allen struggles, then what you're saying is definitely true. Could they be thinking of moving off of him? Because remember, Josh Allen is entering his third year. And so we're creeping a little bit closer to the end of his deal, which means, you got to decide you're going to pick up a fifth-year option. Are you going to give him an extension? How much are you going to pay him? Now, I think both me and unless Josh Allen makes a huge jump, we don't think he's going to be paid like a top, number top 5 quarterback.
Are we sure? Are we sure about that?
That's why I said it. That's why I said I'm not. If we think, I mean, it's hard because every quarterback that comes up with a contract, and if you say you're our starter, they're thinking, oh, you got to make me top 5 money.
Well, I mean, top 5 money is one thing, but starter money is another. And let's keep in mind, at this point, it's not about how good you are. It's just about what is the normal in this position. And if you think that this guy is your franchise guy for the time being, you have to pay him the money. You can't just let Josh Allen walk. That's just not what's going to happen. It's the same thing happening with Dak Prescott. It's not that Dak deserves somewhat of money, and in my opinion, I think he does. But a lot of people don't think he does, but that's not the point. The point is he's going to get paid like a top 5 guy because the stats he had back it up. And 2, it's just how the position is. If you don't like it, devalue the quarterback, and that's not going to happen. The quarterback is the most valuable position in all of sports. So that's just how the cookie crumbles, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely see your point. And, I mean, we'll have to see, but obviously Josh Allen can at least make the decision easier by playing well. If he struggles, and we hit that point now, it's just like, But if he plays well, I'm sure Buffalo will be like, okay, we can talk it out, probably give you a big deal, and we'll go from there. Just like they get any quarterback in that position. Because we have a lot of quarterbacks coming up, on deals. I believe Lamar was drafted the same year as Josh Allen, so that also could determine how much Josh Allen gets. If Lamar gets a big deal, then Josh is like,
Lamar gets a big deal?
Okay, when Lamar gets a big deal, Josh is going to be like, all right, so you see how much he got paid. And a player is always going to think they're the best, so they're like, well, I deserve at least the same, if not more than him.
That's how most people fight for their contracts. When everything is open source and we all know who gets what and who's getting what, people are going to, you see it all the time. I remember when Michael Thomas got paid, what did Julio go do? Give me more money. So it just tends to happen all the time. But we're going to take another break, and coming out of it, we are going to talk more about this coronavirus, and specifically in one state that things are getting really, 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 really escalating to a bad level.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, you're back with the GSMC Football Podcast. And Brice, are you aware that the coronavirus is causing a lot of things happening amongst our country, and not just our country, our football, Brice? Our football is suffering. We don't know what's happening. We don't know who's playing. Everybody's catching it. It's looking bad. And I think if you are reasonable, right? If you understood what was actually happening here, a lot of people are the way we've handled it as a country, as a society in America, is that eventually you're going to come across it. You may be asymptomatic. You may show symptoms, but until a vaccine is shown, a lot of people are going to be exposed to the virus. Now, that does not mean, we should go back to regular scheduled programming. It means that we need to be more careful. And I think a lot of other states have reopened, have moved faster than others, and a lot of people may have gotten careless because of it, and we may be moving too fast as a nation. Multiple Cowboys players, Texans players have tested positive for COVID-19 recently. So That means even Pro Bowl running back Ezekiel Elliott, who remember a few months ago was with Dak Prescott at a party, at the very, very beginning when the COVID stuff was really unknown. We didn't know what was going on. It just didn't look good. And according to, this was all reported via Ian Rappaport and NFL Network's, Tom Placero. None of the players are believed to have been in the team facilities, and the Cowboys and Texas team followed proper health protocols. But Elliott's agent told Rappaport that the Dallas standout is feeling good. But the team, however, issued a statement that it could not provide information. And due to federal and local privacy laws, we were unable to provide information regarding the personal health of any of their employees. This is what the Cowboys released as a statement. And, players testing positive is a development that was predicted by the NFL's chief medical officer. He said, we are fully expect to have positive cases that will arise. He said in May, and in a call with agents on Monday, NFL Players Association medical director Tom Mayer said that the current plan in place is to test players for the coronavirus about 3 times per week, isolating those who test positive, Pizzero reported. And according to Mayer, there's a 90% chance reliable saliva testing is available before players return to facilities. So the NFLPA expects to make progress on overall protocols going forward, with the rough estimate of within 30 days, according to the Players Union and the executive director, DeMaurice Smith. And the schedule starts of training for most clubs is roughly 6 weeks away. So, of course, we heard previously Von Miller tested positive, and LA Rams center Brian Allen did in April. Of course, Sean Payton also tested positive a while ago. And, most coaches have begun returning to facilities. No players have returned, as NFL's virtual offseason has still been going down throughout the weeks. So, all that being said, how do we perceive football going forward? Because I'm not sure what this is going to mean for when games start to get involved, right? Because this is my biggest thing, Brice. You listening to me? You feeling me? Imagine this, right? The Falcons are getting ready to play the 49ers. It's a big game. You need Matt Ryan to come play. Boom. Matt Ryan tests positive for coronavirus. What's gonna happen? You can't just let him play. You can't let Matt Ryan play, right? You can't. So what do you do? Do you forfeit the game? You got to throw in Matt Schaub? Is it an asterisk? Do you postpone the game? How do you handle this? Like, what is the way? Like, what is the way? Like, cause I really don't know. What is the way? Cause if you're supposed to isolate players that contract coronavirus, right? You can't stop people from doing stuff when they're away from the facilities, right? You can't keep people away from going to nightclubs that are open in certain states. You can't keep people away from going to restaurants that are open in certain states. People are going to do what they want once you leave those facility doors, right? You can't hold them prisoner per se. And it's all about it's person to person on how they conduct themselves outside. And, most people think, well, if you're going to be safe, for the betterment of your money and the team and success, you would stay inside and you do your best to keep yourself away from potential contamination or getting the virus. But as we've seen so far among regular people in this country, it's just not happening. It's not going to happen. So what is the plan? What is the plan when somebody who is important to a team and you have to keep them away, even if they're asymptomatic, they're not showing symptoms, but they tested positive? What do you do? What do you do?
I mean, all they can do is just do what the protocol says. Just got to test and isolate. That's really all you can do. I mean, it depends on how bad the situation is. If, like what you said with Matt Ryan, if he tested positive and then he was able to get around like all the team and everybody from the other team, then you might have to cancel the game because it's like, well, we don't know who got it. But if it's like, hey, you stepped into the facility, you tested, he's positive. All right, Matt, can't come any further. Then you'll be pretty much solid. You just have to go with your backup quarterback. It's funny because I believe Bruce Arians said this. He said with COVID-19, you might see teams keeping 3 quarterbacks just in case, because you don't want to only have one. And then on game day, you only got 2 active. You only have 2 quarterbacks on your roster, and then you have a guy who gets COVID, and then you only have 1 quarterback. So if he gets hurt, you're done. So that might also affect rosters. Somebody from a different position might not have a job because of that. So it really just depends on what happens. You know, it's going to be hard to police, but I think they're just going to stick to whatever they have as a protocol and just do what they can with it and hope for the best. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad, because I'm sure if it gets too bad, then obviously they're going to have to change some things. They may have to cancel some things, or they may have to push back. But if they don't have to do any of that, then I think that they're going to try to do everything they can, which they're trying to do currently, to go forward with the plan that was already set and not have to change too much and try to have everything operating the same way so they can still at least make comparable amount of money for the league, and the players can still get paid and everybody can be safe, and then it doesn't get too bad while this pandemic is still going on. And hopefully everything works out. We really have to see, man, because like, think about what every team reports. There's definitely going to be some news about some players having COVID-19 when they report to camp.
Yeah, and it's already happening now before people even report to camp. So just like how we just finished talking about Josh Allen having all these people, how many of them have been tested since then, right? We don't know. And we'll never know unless they, like, you know, get reported or they reveal it or things like that. But that's another thing. And we're going to continue talking about this as, like, you know, football as a whole, not just the NFL coming up. But to close out of this in particular conversation, what's the game plan when it comes to all this stuff? Because what if somebody on game day who showed no signs of having the virus gets tested before the game? Like, this isn't like, you know, a drug test where it randomly happens. Like, this is scheduled stuff. It will keep happening repeatedly. And I feel like what the NFL is planning to do is just have COVID tests throughout, you know, weeks or throughout the week that doesn't affect games. So if they're going to try and do it 3 times a week, they're probably going to try and do it, you know, I guess a Tuesday, a Thursday, and either a Saturday or a Friday or something like that doesn't affect games, because they can't do it on game day, right? They just can't I can't see them doing it then. And if they do it on game day and somebody, like at least a few people on the roster, like I think if it gets to 5, they have to think about, you know, what are you going to do about this? Because let's keep this in mind. We're only a few months removed from when the NBA literally shut down multiple, like 2 games because of coronavirus. And it was only a few players that tested positive. And they had to get everyone who was associated with the NBA tested. So I don't know. But let's take a quick break and we'll continue on.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, Brice, so we're still continuing this dilemma of the COVID-19 virus that has taken the world by storm, but also really, really causing a lot of friction within sports because we just don't know what's going to happen. And I wanted to take this down a few levels because, you know, not only have the Texans, Dallas Cowboys have had some problems, the University of Houston had to stop their voluntary workouts recently because of the COVID-19. Like, they just had too many players show up positive that they could not continue to practice. And I don't know if it's just the area of Texas alone is just having a really, really hard time with a lot of new cases or things like that. But I just have to imagine at an even lower level, like, are we going to see high school football this year? Like, I have to imagine youth sports is going to be really, really, how are you going to manage having youth sports? How is that even going to be regulated? Because there's just no way you're going to get kids frequent testing every third day, every second day for
and parents
youth
aren't going
sports.
to also go for it either.
Exactly. Like, that's a lot of resources for one, and we don't even know. Well, a lot of colleges are preparing to have, you know, classes back in the fall and people coming back to campus. So depending on which state you're in, that seems to be what is going to happen. And if that's the case, I would assume that high schools are preparing for, you know, kids to come back as well. But I don't know about youth sports, man, because you really just don't know. Travel, let's say travel baseball, right? There's just no way you're going to have travel baseball this year. Like, who's taking their kid across the Southeast or the Midwest or anything like that to play travel baseball with this virus that is seemingly kind of, no one really knows anything on how it spreads, how fast it spreads, and how common it is to spread amongst people. Like, there are people that probably already have had the virus that can potentially even spread it again. Like, there's no concrete science about this whole thing. We're all learning things on the fly. Nobody really knows anything. So maybe they're just going to play because you really don't know how it's going to affect anything. But I don't know. How does this affect the next recruiting class of college football? How does this affect, you know, people's senior seasons? Because it's very unlikely that, let's say, if high school football were to get canceled, right, and not happen, it's not like they're going to give them another year of high school eligibility, right? I just don't see that happening. Like, if they graduate and they have to move on. But, you know, we've already seen it with recent graduates, right? If they were playing basketball, they were probably done after the season. Like, they were done this season. Like, it was finished. Nothing else to go. You saw it at the college level, of course. And in college, they can grant another year of eligibility. But in high school, it's just something that's just not possible. I don't know. I'm just really concerned because I don't know what you do with youth sports at this point.
I mean, there's not really much you can do. I mean, the thing is, you got to think about it from levels like this. Think about high school. Think about seniors. Your senior year, you can't even play the sport you love. You're trying to get into a good college. You're looking for your senior year, maybe your breakout year. You're making upward trends. You don't even have a chance to play it. Now, how does that affect you and what you can do? Basically, now colleges that recruit you, whatever sport you play, are going to be recruiting you based off what you did before, not off what you did recently. And that's going to change the entire college game. And then you got to think about kids going down. You know, you got, like I said, youth sports, parents. Parents are not going to want to pay money to get their kid in a sport that they could get COVID-19 from. That's just not going to happen. So you're going to have a lot of youth sports not around. You don't know how many of these leagues are dependent upon the parent money and them making money from the sport every year. Now they have a year without it. Well, do they go extinct now? Do they just stop operating? I mean, you see how it's affecting the college landscape. There's some colleges are cutting programs in different sports because of that. So it obviously is a trickle down effect from top to bottom. So there's a lot of things here that could go very wrong for a lot of people here. And, it also, you don't know how many people could sit here, they're playing a sport and then they have to take a longer time off from playing that sport. You don't know how you're going to be coming back. You haven't played in so long. Outside of the pickup games or practices or workouts, you're still not able to actually play it. And so you're having to ease yourself back in thinking, man, 2021, maybe the next time I actually can play a legitimate game. I mean, listen, when everything goes back to normal, we're all going to be relieved. But right now, there's a lot of things that people are going to be going through. Because like I said, if they do, and we don't know if every state's going to do this, but if they do bring, all the college students back and the high school students, middle school and everything, it's that in itself is an issue that you're going to have to decide if you're a parent, if you're comfortable with. You don't want to send your kid off and then he comes back home sick. And, and regardless of whatever sport, you don't want him going to practice or going to a game, he comes back home sick. It's just something that's going to be, it's definitely going to affect things until things change. Now, obviously, it depends on how you feel whenever the vaccines are made. And maybe that's when people are going to be like, okay, we can start really going full force back operational. But till then, it's going to be, you're kind of going to have to be on eggshells with it. If you trust it and you trust that, okay, I'm going to trust whoever, what they say, what their system is, everything, and I'm going to allow my kid or I'm going to allow them to go to this thing, then okay. But if you're not, there's going to be a lot of parents who pull themselves out and say, listen, you're not doing it because I'm not taking that chance.
There's going to be a lot of golf players come soon, as I feel like golf is one of those sports where you can really minimize the amount of potential, virus contact but on a more serious note, aside from golf, think about how spring sports work in academia, right? As far as the timetables, especially in high school spring sports. So a lot of kids come after the new year, of course, back into high school, and that's still cold weather time. So that's about when the second wave is predicted to come about. That means, basketball might have to be on pause. Soccer has to be on pause. So no travel teams. Because, soccer is a really, really, really interesting sport on how it's handled in the youth, where a lot of high school soccer isn't nearly as, competitive as it could be, because a lot of players who are really skillful don't play on their high school teams. They play travel. They go to clubs, like private clubs, and do all that kind of stuff. But if they can't do that, what are they going to do? They won't be able to play a sport. They may not even be in school at that point, because a lot of universities are considering doing stuff where they speed up their curriculum, or not their curriculum, but they speed up their semesters as far as what they need to get done, because they don't want a whole bunch of kids on the same campus during the second wave. So from college level down, sports are going to suffer something that we've never seen before. And I think we've all been wondering, how is this going to happen? And we've all been worrying about the current. How are we going to play football this season? Is basketball going to finish the season? But we haven't thought about when after all that is done, and when we see what the NFL, college football looks like in a few months, how does everything else function sport-wise? How do we get back to a more reasonable way of playing sports? Like we see now, a lot of European teams, the Premier League is starting back. The, La Liga, Bundesliga, you have fans and stands now in some places. And that's all well and good, but that's because they've done an extraordinary job of, trying to limit the spread of this virus to where they can do this. And they have an idea of how this works. But you also see in other countries where they've limited the virus to a certain extent, but then they also have another outbreak in the next few weeks or things like that. There's just no way of knowing when you're in the clear without a vaccine. So I just wonder, when do we call it professional, and when do we call it these are kids and we're not going to put our kids in danger like that?
Yeah, definitely, man. We just gotta hope for the best, man. We just gotta hope everything turns out well, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I agree. All you can do is hope and, just wait and see where. That's just the worst part. That's all you really can say, because we're not experts on disease, or we're not working for the CDC. We do podcasts about football, and that's what I love to do and continue to do. But we do live in a time of real uncertainty about just how this virus will impact the rest of our lives. But we're going to take our final break here, and then we're going to get into some money talk, because somebody just got paid. This is the GSMC.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Brice, It has come to my attention that a guy that brought you to a Super Bowl has been paid. And extended, should I say, because he was paid before, but now he's been extended 3 more years off his 3-year deal. So now it's a 6-year deal total. Kyle Shanahan has made some money in recent time. He has been rewarded, and his contract replaces the last 3 years, according to Adam Schefter. So, it was signed previously in 2017, and now he has a much more lucrative deal. And when he took over the 49ers, they had the worst roster in the NFL, and during Shanahan's first season, he lost 10 of his first 11 games, but then they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, built one of the best teams in the NFL in just 3 seasons. So they have an elite roster, a really, really high quality coaching staff, like coaching staffs that could be head coaches. I don't know why they aren't, but it's crazy. Kyle Shanahan is among some of the best coaches in our game. So Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, who you name it, a whole bunch of these guys. And he's much younger than a lot of the best coaches in the league. He's only 40. And he might end up having a better career when it's all said and done. So we all know about the 28-3 lead. We know how much that has continued to sort of tail him and haunt him among his career. But I'll be the first to say it. Maybe we should be looking. How long are we going to keep letting Kyle Shanahan take the full brunt of the 28-3 is my question, right? Because there's a lot of things that necessarily was not all his fault. And I think a lot of stuff, especially last Super Bowl, ended up coming back on him in a weird way that I don't think was necessarily reasonable. So people think that he choked last year, right? Would you say that, Brice?
Yeah. A lot of people feel like his offensive play calling got stale again, and not at most.
When we look at it, there was a lot of things that he did not control, right? So Jimmy Garoppolo's making audibles at the line of scrimmage. He audibles out of run plays and goes to pass. He misses wide open people. He's like this. You cannot honestly look at last Super Bowl and be like, you know what? Kyle Shanahan has to take the biggest brunt of this, right? I mean, technically he will because he's the head coach, and that's just kind of what the job entails. And that's what happened to Dan Quinn when Kyle Shanahan was there as the OC. He took the big brunt of all of it because he is the head coach. He is the face leadership of that franchise outside of the quarterback and outside of the GM. Those are the top 3 people who take blame for big losses and big moments. Now Kyle Shanahan is the head coach, and there's no escaping it, and everybody already knows that he has a history of not finishing the job when it is all said and done. So some people might look at this and say, are you sure? We don't even know if is he a winner? Like, is he one of those guys where he's really great in the regular season, he'll have all the stats, he'll look really good, but is he a winner? And I'd argue that that's hogwash, because people used to do this to Andy Reid for years. Remember? Before he won the Super Bowl, Andy Reid was just Kyle Shanahan. Andy Reid was just old Kyle Shanahan. And now look where he's at. He's probably one of the best coaches in the last 30 years. He's going to go into the NFL Hall of Fame, no doubt. Deservedly so. He was probably going to go before the Super Bowl ring. And now it's basically a lock. But imagine if Andy Reid doesn't win the Super Bowl, right? It's like literally looking at a mirror between two coaches that one is just young, who has this history of not being able to finish the job, and maybe a little bit unfairly because he is young. He's not 100% at fault at all of this stuff, but he has to take a lot of the brunt. But, you know, the man did get paid, and I don't think that's a problem. He's definitely still one of the better coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, listen, it's just that rhetoric that happens in the league. If you have one thing that wasn't good on your resume, it's going to stick with you. The main thing that reminds people of that situation will stick with them. I think, you know, it stuck with Andy for the longest time, you know, with all those good teams he had in Philadelphia, and not being able to get over the hump, and just people thought he could never win the big game. You know, he's just great off offensive line, but in the playoffs it doesn't work. He always has losses he shouldn't have. And I think Kyle Shanahan's entering that mode. You know, the only way he can get past it is he has to win a Super Bowl. And the 49ers continue to make it back but lose in collapsing fashions. People are going to say he can't get it done. There's just nothing he can do. It's just not getting it done. And so, you know, he's going to have to really, you know, fight those demons off, because that's just something that's going to stick with him for the rest of his career. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I feel like with some of the talented coaches that we have in the league, we shouldn't allow one bad moment to reflect an entire person's career, because sometimes people can have great careers, but then they have that one big bad moment. So why is it if they have a bad moment potentially first, now all of a sudden that's just every good moment is irrelevant if they don't erase that bad moment? You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those things where I think, you know, Kyle's doing everything he can to be the best coach he can be. He still has one of the most talented rosters in the league. The 49ers are projected to be in the playoffs again next year and be just as competitive, if not a Super Bowl contending team as they were. And, you know, obviously we know about Super Bowl hangovers, so we'll have to see if that affects them. But, you know, I think they just got to stay the ship, keep it going, and hopefully and keep pushing forward with what they want to do in their plan. You know, him and John Lynch have done a great job building that team, and you can't take that away from them, you know, because people always like to talk about what happened at the end. But remember, the 49ers were, I think it was the Super Bowl year they went with Colin. And then after that, for that 3 to 4 year span, they were basically kind of irrelevant for the most part. They really weren't doing too much until Kyle Shanahan got there and got them back to prominence. So, you know, I just think it's one of those things where you can't really sit there and judge him too much, and you just got to let him continue to do his story, because he's only been a head coach for 3 years now. And last year was his third year. So he's still young in the game as well. And I think, you know, Andy Reid, this happened over decades. Kyle Shanahan's been 3 years. Let's give him a break here.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it like this. This is just how sports operate. Remember, we relating this back to basketball, because for some reason I like to make this a pseudo basketball GSMC podcast. So look how we treat Harden, right? Harden has been a top 5 NBA player since being in Houston, essentially. And people really, really Harden brings a lot of it onto himself, considering the style of play and how the Rockets play, and just kind of how they see themselves and how, you know, everything kind of comes with them. But the fact that he hasn't gone to the finals yet is, people hold that against him really hard. And I think a lot of it is unfair, and primarily because in situations where he was close, It's just a lot of fluky stuff, and you're going up against the Warriors, one of the best teams we've ever seen assembled. And I feel like that is going to be held against them until whenever, like forever. People still say Charles Barkley isn't as good because he didn't win a ring. Or like Charles Barkley mentions that not winning a ring really does hurt you when you retire. Like, you never really see how much it hurts you until you retire. But hopefully, Kyle Shanahan doesn't have to go through that, and he'll get his Andy Reid moment sooner rather than later. But, Brice, this is the end of the GSMC football podcast for tonight. And, I think it was a good one. It was really informative, and I hope everybody listening had as much fun as we did doing this. I encourage everybody to, rate and review us. 5 stars across the board, please. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, we're there. This is Ethan for Brice. We're going to go ahead and sign out, and we'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.